Marksman Hunter's aimshot is guaranteed to critically strike with the Apex talent. So what happens if you don't invest in critical strike at all? As of March 3rd, this character is fully geared, and as you can see, I've deliberately put zero investment into critical strike, not a single point. Every available stat has instead been distributed between mastery and haste in a balanced ratio, focusing on amplifying raw damage and improving rotational flow rather than increasing crit chance. The idea is simple. If the crit is already guaranteed, there's no need to chase more probability. Instead, we push the damage profile itself higher and make each guaranteed aim shot hit as hard and as clean as possible. This setup is only possible because of the Apex talent, Take Aim. Once you reach max level and fully invest all 4 points into it, aim shot is upgraded to always critically strike. And that single change completely reshapes how you approach stat distribution. What makes it even more interesting is that even if you invest absolutely nothing into critical strike, you still retain roughly 14% crit from base stats alone. That baseline is surprisingly high, especially when you compare it to haste and mastery, which start at much lower values. By choosing not to invest a single point into critical strike, you free up a significant amount of stat budget that can instead be poured into mastery and haste. Mastery is simple and direct. It increases the damage and range of all hunter abilities, meaning every single button you press benefits from it. Haste, on the other hand, reduces attack speed and global cooldown. Your casts feel cleaner, your globals feel sharper, and your damage windows become more controlled. In Midnight, the true strength of Marksman Hunter revolves around its spell rotation, with aimshot sitting at the center of that cycle. Because so much of your pressure is built around lining up and firing aim shots efficiently, higher haste plays a major role in your overall performance. With Midnight reshaping talent trees, it can honestly feel overwhelming figuring out where to begin or how to adapt your build properly. That's exactly where SkyCoach comes in. Rather than copying a random build off a website, SkyCoach gives you structured, personalized guidance built around your character. The biggest difference is the one-on-one format. You're working directly with a high-level player so you understand not just what to change, but why it matters. Self-play is also an option if you just want to avoid the grind and play directly with high-level players. It's a great way to learn content while gearing up quickly and efficiently. SkyCoach also offers a variety of WoW services that can help whether you're returning after a break, pushing new content, or simply trying to enjoy the game without unnecessary trial and error. They are trusted by over 150,000 players worldwide and also provide professional level support in several other major games. Use the promo code below and see how far you can push your gameplay with the right support behind you. Since this build revolves entirely around aimshot, the talent choices are kept very focused. Rather than spreading points across multiple mechanics, the goal is to reinforce anything that directly strengthens or accelerates aimshot itself. For the hero talent, we choose Sentinel. This grants access to Sentinel's mark, which ultimately allows your next aim shot against the marked target to deal 55% increased direct damage, compared to choosing Dark Ranger, which provides Spotter's mark as a baseline 40% damage increase. The Sentinel route effectively lets you fire aim shots that are 15% stronger than that of the Dark Rangers. Aim shot by itself isn't particularly impressive if you simply fire it on cooldowns. The real power comes from timing it properly against targets affected by Sentinel's mark. Before being upgraded to Sentinel's mark, this mechanic is known as Spotter's mark, and it is applied with a 30% chance whenever you damage an enemy using abilities empowered by precise shots. This means your rotation naturally revolves around consuming your precise shot stacks with arcane shot as frequently as possible. By cycling those stacks consistently, you increase the number of Sentinel's mark procs, which in turn feeds more empowered aim shots into your rotation and keeps your damage windows properly aligned. Another key component here is Moon's Blessing talent, which increases the chance to summon a Sentinel Owl by an additional 10%, bringing the total chance up to 40%. That extra 10% may not look dramatic on paper, but in practice, it makes a noticeable difference in how often the effect appears during the real gameplay. And this consistency matters a lot, because as I mentioned earlier, the alpha and omega of this build is aimshot. If Sentinel's mark isn't active on the target, aimshot quickly loses much of its impact. An entire build can feel surprisingly underwhelming. Plus, every time the owl appears, it also reduces the cooldown of aimshot by 2 seconds, which helps accelerate the overall rhythm of the rotation and brings your primary nuke back much more frequently. And that isn't the only source of cooldown reduction. Through the Apex talent, every shot of rapid fire further reduces the cooldown of aimshot by 0.5 seconds, and with the target acquisition talent, consuming Sentinel's mark also reduces aimshot cooldown by 1 additional second. When all of these effects start stacking together during real combat, the cooldown of aimshot begins to shrink much faster than you would normally expect. Over the course of a fight, these repeated reductions add up quickly, allowing you to fire significantly more aim shots than you normally would and keeping the pressure on your target almost constantly. Another talent that cannot be overlooked here is lock and load, which gives your range auto attacks a 10% chance to make your next aim shot instant. Through the Sentinel talent Stalk and Strike, casting Moonlight Chakram will automatically grant you lock and load, and with the Sharp Nail Shot talent, casting Volley has a 100% chance to grant lock and load as well. In other words, instead of waiting for a passive 10% proc, you can deliberately trigger it through your rotation. Once lock and load is active, you can chain these effects together to create extremely fast burst sequences. For example, a combo like Aimshot, Volley, Aimshot, Trueshot, Moonlight Chakram, Aimshot allows you to fire 3 consecutive instant aim shots that can overwhelm your target almost immediately. If you also pick up the Bullet Storm and Incendiary Ammunition talents, it becomes important to weave rapid fire between your aim shots whenever possible, because rapid fire directly amplifies the damage of your next aim shot. Each rapid fire cast increases aim shot's damage by 10%, and on top of that, it also boosts critical strike damage by 20%. And as mentioned earlier, thanks to the Apex talent, aimshot always critically strikes, which means that critical damage bonus is applied every single time. This interaction becomes even stronger when combined with double tap. For example, if you cast Volley and then follow it with rapid fire empowered by double tap, you can quickly build 18 Bullet Storm stacks, resulting in 18% increased aimshot damage and 36% increased critical strike damage. So the burst sequence naturally evolves into something like this: Volley, rapid fire to stack Bullet Storm, then Trueshot to ensure Sentinel's mark is applied to the target, followed by Moonlight Chakram to trigger lock and load, allowing you to fire an instant aim shot right into the fully amplified window. When everything lines up correctly, the result is an extremely fast and heavily empowered aimshot burst. Don't forget to keep spending your precise shot buffs to trigger Sentinel's mark as often as possible. Next comes the Trueshot talents. I did spend some time deciding between calling the shots and unerring vision, but in the end, I chose calling the shots. The reasoning is fairly simple. Rather than slightly increasing the value of each Trueshot window, I prefer to reduce its cooldown so that I can activate Trueshot more frequently throughout the fight. Because more Trueshot uptime means more opportunities to trigger the burst sequence we talked about earlier, especially when it's paired with Moonlight Chakram to set up the lock and load combo. In practice, having Trueshot available more often ends up feeling much more impactful than simply empowering each individual activation. Race choice isn't particularly critical for this build, but there are still a few solid options worth mentioning. On the Alliance side, Dwarves are a strong pick thanks to their racial bonus that increases critical strike damage. For the Horde, Orcs and Mag'har Orcs remain classic PvP choices. While their racials aren't directly tied to critical scaling in this build, their overall combat bonuses have always made them reliable in PvP scenarios. If you can appreciate the unique style and flavor of a Troll Hunter, they are definitely a fun and thematic choice. The newly introduced allied race, Haranir, is also worth considering, since their ratio provides a 1% increase to critical strike damage, which naturally complements a 100% critical strike aim shot build. The strengths and weaknesses of this build are fairly clear. Since aimshot deals physical damage, its effectiveness is naturally influenced by target's armor. That means the build performs much better against classes with lower armor values, typically close wearers like mages and other cast type classes. Against those targets, the burst from aimshot can be devastating. On the other hand, heavily armored plate classes are able to reduce significant portion of that physical damage, which makes them a bit more resilient against this setup. But don't worry too much about that. Those matchups are exactly where the Black Arrow build I will introduce next really shines.